Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hi, this is Wayne Callan for Attitude Magazine. Today's topic, I know what I need to do, but I just don't do it, is something we can all relate to. It is frustrating and maddening when we wake up with the best of intentions to get pressing things done, only to find that we haven't done them by the day's end. We need a better game plan, and I think we will have it by the end of this webinar. We are very fortunate to have J. Russell Ramsay, Associate Professor of Clinical Psychology in Psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine. He is also co-author, along with Anthony Rostain, of Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Adult ADHD. Welcome, Dr. Ramsay. Good to have you here today.
Thanks so much for having me back, and thank you to everybody who is joining in today. And the last time I had an opportunity to speak on an Attitude webinar, it was specifically around procrastination. And I probably unwittingly used the same title, I know what I need to do, but I just don't do it. So today's going to be an extension of that, where we talk about some of the basic coping strategies that we all know, that we've all heard about, but how do we use these skills, actually implement them to turn our intentions into actions, to turn the plans into behavior. So hopefully we'll put a new spin or a new shine on some old standards. As always, being a psychologist, there's a lot that goes into human behavior, including for working with adults with ADHD. But ultimately, when people walk out of the room at the end of the session or finish up treatment, they probably want to know that they're going to be able to do those reasonable things that they set out to do. So what gets in the way with ADHD of just easily doing what we want to do? And there's a whole host of things which I summarized on the left-hand side of the column. In an all too brief way, we can think of ADHD rather than pursuing the elusive A and the H. How much attention is too much or too little, same with activity. It's really about self-regulation. How do we stop ourselves from doing some things, get ourselves started doing other things? So all these underlying difficulties with executive functions, dopamine, they can lead to the distractibility, the impulsivity, all these things, including that sense that people will have, I was busy all day, but I didn't get something done. I started something, I got off to a good start, then I stopped, never got back to it and quit. There was something I wanted to do, but I kept focusing on the most immediate. These are all things that they can lead to good intentions, but the intentions are greater than the actions. Today we want to talk about what are the building blocks for turning these intentions into actions. So I work in the cognitive behavioral framework, and I went through this in more detail last time. The different domains of interventions within our CBT model, so the cognitive modification, changing how you think, behavioral modification, changing what you do, implementation strategies, how do we do and put into play and implement the skills and strategies that we all know we need to do, and the acceptance, mindfulness, and persistence, how do we tolerate the discomfort long enough to get engaged so we can get the positive reinforcement that comes with task completion. So on to the next slide. So we're talking about our cute little phrases. We all know the strategies, but we need tactics for implementing the strategies so that we can reverse the intention-action ratio so we can get more action out of it. And hopefully part of what you'll take away from today are some takeaway reminders for how do all these coping strategies I know, what will be the things the rest of my day on Thursday, Friday, over the weekend, what will be some of these reminders that will help me better use the coping strategies that are out there in all the wonderful books on adult ADHD, but the ongoing challenge is how do we put them into play. So for starting off today, and I want to leave plenty of time for some question and answer and hearing from people about difficulties implementing these things, let's start off with, and this is a wider domain of the to-do list. What is it that you want to do, have to do today? So other ways to think about the to-do list, because people will start rolling their eyes, and I would imagine people are out there going, oh, the to-do list, it's so overwhelming, and I come up with one every day, and I don't get anything done. Well, the to-do list is sort of our budget for ourselves. How do we spend ourselves that day? So if you were a dollar bill, or let's just say 24 hours in a day, if you're $24, how are you going to budget out that money? And to-do lists often fall under the category of time management. So it's managing time, organizing our behavior over the day, but it's also how we manage our effort and our energy. And it's a nice way to externalize all that we have to do so we can make sure we're setting up realistic expectations for ourselves, not putting everything on the to-do list and then feeling overwhelmed because we don't know where to start. And even the notion of having a to-do list can trigger thoughts like, I shouldn't have to do this. Other people probably don't have to spend as much time doing this. This must be bad, or at least, I feel bad that I have to do this. So we want to, with all these skills, we want to be able to customize them to each person, but also not fall into rationalizing and justifying bad habits that really aren't going to end up getting you where you want to get to. So the thing about planning, like a to-do list or whatever else, it takes time to do that. In and of itself, planning is another thing for the to-do list almost. So we talk about having a reasonable block of time, and we just say 10 minutes, 600 seconds, and we reframe that because we reframe time in a lot of ways, because 10 minutes is sort of a blow-off time. I'll be there in 10 minutes. But when we think about 600 seconds, it doesn't sound that long. Like I probably just used up 20 of those seconds describing the 600 seconds. So it's really not that long of a time once you get down to doing it. And it's pretty much finding a place relatively free from distractions and spend some honest time just thinking about and sketching out how you want to plan out your day. So it might be writing these plans down in the daily planner to defining the to-do list. And these are different skills within the to-do list planning. So we're going to tease these apart because they sort of work together. So one of the things about the to-do list, people will say, well, it's really overwhelming to look at everything I have to do. And that's exactly right, because the daily to-do list, that's just meant to be a little holder for the next couple things you're going to do. Some people find it helpful to just have the dump list, the comprehensive to-do list, sitting down and really thinking about getting out a notebook, a computer file, finding a place that you can sit down and think about it and just start unloading. What are all the obligations, plans, errands, commitments, recreational ideas for about the next 1 to 6 weeks? For some people, they might want a shorter time frame, just the next week. Some people, they might be calibrated more, the next fiscal quarter, say. So that's where it can be personalized. But this is meant to be a dump list, to get it out of your head and document it. So this could be things like, oh yeah, I have to work on income taxes. Our roof is getting old. We should look at contractors. Got a birthday party or a wedding I have to buy a gift for in 5 weeks. It's meant to get it out of your head so that you don't have to carry it around. In a way, a metaphor is the comprehensive to-do list is like your iTunes account. It's where you have all your songs, all your movies, all your books, everything. It's the library. And later on, when we talk about the daily to-do list, that's supposed to be your iPod or your iPhone, just the songs you're carrying around for that day. Now, some people will say, well, I write this down and then I lose it. Well, we hope that you there are ways to decrease the likelihood of losing things by having a system. But even if you do lose it, it is meant to be regenerated periodically, so that doesn't have to be a deal breaker. So we want to have it stored someplace where you can refer to it later, but it's something you can go back to for reminders, again, so that way you don't have to carry things around in your head. Sometimes people with ADHD, a distraction is, I have to act on something while I'm thinking about it or else I'll forget it. So all of a sudden there might be something like, okay, I'm going to look up contractors for the roof right now while I'm thinking about it, and then we don't get to the thing that was really a priority for that day. So we have that comprehensive to-do list. You have the iTunes account elsewhere. So the daily to-do list, that's like your iPod or the thing that you're carrying around just for that day. So this is meant to be a disposable list. This is getting to be an antiquated notion, but it's sort of like the newspaper. It's just for that day, and then we're going to recycle it. So even though you can put this on a smartphone or whatnot in the notepad feature, we find sometimes making it tangible, an index card, the back of an envelope, some disposable piece of paper that you can just jot it down on. Again, spending a few minutes as you're coming up with your daily plan, thinking about what are the things on the to-do list, what are some to-do items that I have to get done today. This is not everything that goes in your daily planner. So if you're a student taking classes, you don't have to write down your classes every day. The to-do list are for things separate from the normal flow of your day. Now, there may be something that you'd say, I want to go to the library between my classes to work on the paper that's due on Friday. That would be something separate. That would be a distinct task. So things that are not part of your typical schedule that require a special investment of time or effort. We say err on the side of fewer rather than more items. Maybe 2, no more than 5 items. Err on the side of fewer. You can always add more after you complete those if you would like. As much as you can, define tasks in specific behavioral terms or actions you can do. So, yeah, we're in tax season right now when this webinar is occurring. So that's one of those that somebody might write on their list, okay, work on taxes. Well, that's big, broad, and vague and overwhelming. But if the specific to-do item task today is go through all envelopes that say important tax document enclosed and just separate them out or organize them, that would be a nice specific behavioral task that increases the likelihood that you'll follow through on that. Now, just doing that, does that mean your taxes are completed? No, but it's a necessary first task that allows us to, a phrase we like is touch the task, make it real, get engaged in it. And once we're engaged in it, this goes back to the webinar on procrastination. Once I get started, I'm a whole lot more likely to keep going on it. Now, we might have to define the next task in, again, specific behavioral terms. Let me go back and get receipts. Let me upload the template for doing the online return, whatever it is. But sort of the sequence of these small to-do tasks eventually accumulate into task completion as we follow through on them. Set realistic time frames to spend on each task. So again, going back to something like taxes, we might say, okay, this Saturday I'm just going to work on taxes till we're done, or until they're done, or I'm going to do that all day for 6 to 8 hours. We don't do stuff we like for that long. But if it's, I'm going to spend 30 minutes organizing the important tax documents, and then maybe I'll spend 30 minutes entering things into the tax return template online. With 30 minutes, there's a start time and an end time. So if we can see the end time, or if we can look at the clock and say, all right, 15 more minutes, then it'll be 11 o'clock, and then I can do something else. It situates the task. Now it's time limited rather than this thing that feels like it can go on forever and ever. And that sounds like a very minor point or something that we all know, but a lot of times at the outset, what will make us not follow through on a task on the to-do list is because we're thinking this is going to take so long, this is going to take me 2 hours. Well, it won't if we spend a 30-minute time, if we set a 30-minute time frame for it. And then using the daily planner, this is how the to-do list syncs with the planner. When today is a good time for me to do this task? So try to do it at each time to get it off the list. So one of the things that one of the helpful little catchphrases that we found that people like is, well, we'll set out a time to do a task during the day, but then as we're going through our office or our house or whatever, we get distracted doing other things. So we talked about when you're setting out to do a task on the to-do list or even anything else that you're setting out to do, the notion of entering the room with a plan. So when you're getting up to work on the task, specify why you're going to another room or what you're getting up to do. So if it would be, okay, I'm going to go into the other room to get all those important tax document envelopes for wherever I organize the mail, remind yourself, okay, I'm going to the front foyer of the house or wherever I keep the mail to get these things and bring them back to the kitchen table to work on them. So what is your intention and why is this intention of value to you? And thinking about the behavioral steps that go into that, because you might be going by the computer where you might see an email, or you might have your cell phone sitting around and see that there's an incoming message, and remind yourself, how might you get off task? So there's nothing that's going to be perfect, but if we remind ourselves, I'm only working on the tax forms for half an hour, so let me get the forms, let me work on them, and then I have plenty of time to go through all the emails or whatnot. Next slide, please. Because what people will describe, I went in to do this task, my to-do step, but then I saw something else in the mail, a bill that needed to be paid, and then I went to pay the bill, and then I saw a pile of laundry that needed to be done, and step by step you get pulled away from the to-do task. So if there are these interruptions that you can reasonably anticipate, it can also be helpful, and there's some research to support this, thinking through how you're going to handle it, and even coming up with an if-then plan. If I go to the other room and there's a bill that does have to be paid, then I'll remind myself I can still pay this when I'm done organizing the tax forms. So then you can proceed and enter the room with a plan, and I think this strategy also helps keep the task in working memory a little longer, so it increases the likelihood we'll follow through with it. So now the daily planner. So this is how we track how we spend ourselves throughout the day. So again, it's another way to externalize time and effort. It may include items from the daily to-do list, but it also situates them within the overall flow of the day. So this helps you track your day throughout the next 24 hours. Today being Thursday, it helps you track Thursday, but it also helps you organize your behavior across several days or a week or a month. So there might be something that you say, this is on my to-do list for today, but there's something I might have to do tomorrow, but making an appointment in the daily planner allows you to sort of put it there in a placeholder and then forget about it today. Now you have to trust the plan then, because you have to trust, I'm going to do what I set out to do on Thursday, so I can forget about that, then it's off the list. Then when Friday rolls around, I can look back in the planner, see something I set out to do, and trust that I'm going to get to it on the next task on Friday. Same principles, defining it in behavioral terms, having start time and end times, so it can fit within the flow of the day. And then this is a grand experiment, putting it into play and see how it works. And nothing's perfect, but as we're starting to do stuff, we're learning more about, well, I can get more done. I can work longer than half an hour on this. Maybe I can work on 45 minutes. And we're finding out how the choreography of our day, okay, after doing a lot of administrative work, I don't want to do more administrative work. I have to do something more physical or just a different type of task. And this is all ways that we can personalize these coping skills. Now, with the daily planner, we are certainly not anti-technology. And if somebody really is wired in and it refers to their smartphone or their electronic planner or it's on their computer screen all day, great. But we also say, when in doubt, start with a paper planner, because one, there's something about being able to lay out a calendar or a week at a glance planner and see days across time and being able to look at those chunks of time, more so than, to my knowledge, you can see in most electronic calendar systems. And there's something about handwriting plans in your calendar and things on your to-do list that helps with the encoding. And you're not going to remember your whole week's plan by memory just because you handwrite it out into the planner, but you do get more of a sense of, wasn't there something else on Thursday that I have to do? And then seeing the plan set out in your own hand helps trigger memories of the mood congruent memory of what was going through your mind when you were sitting down writing out the plan. One of the things about daily planners, they tend to get underutilized. So we might think this is just for scheduling the dentist visit in 6 months and various medical visits, things, anniversaries or birthdays that happen, once a year. No, this is meant to write down, this is where we write down the classes, all the meetings at work, when we want to go to the gym, when we have to pick up and drop off children from school. This is when we really look at the whole flow of the day. Again, the budget for how we spend ourselves, including things like scheduling downtime, when we want to get to sleep, get-togethers with friends. We're big proponents of scheduling downtime and recreational time. So even though you want to overuse your planner, you also want to err on the side of under-scheduling, leaving enough buffer time between commitments, between tasks and meetings to get from point A to point B. And that's something that you can figure out. Try to keep your task appointments, those to-do list things, as specific and behavioral as possible. There may be some things in your planner, such as a meeting at work or time you're in a class, that you just sort of write, class from 1 to 3 or something like that. And once you're in class, that sort of takes care of itself. You might have times that you go to the gym, but there might be other appointments that you write in, task appointments that you make with yourself, such as like working on taxes, where you say, just get all the envelopes with tax documents. Start times and end times for tasking activities whenever possible. And again, err on the side of less time rather than more, at least at the outset. Because the notion is we can start psyching ourselves out about the task when it looks and feels overwhelming. So if we lower the bar and say, well, if I'm only doing this for 30 minutes, even if it's as bad as I think it's going to be, I can handle 30 minutes and I'll still have the rest of my day. So the daily planner has to become, be it electronic or paper, a tool of daily life, along with your keys, wallets, purse, cell phone, glasses, whatever else are those things that you do the pat down at the beginning of the day, checking your pockets to make sure you have them with you. You got to have a planner that is portable enough with you, because you have to take it with you to refer to it throughout the day, be it electronic or paper. So then how do we put this together to choreograph what we do? So again, we got the planner, so we have all this wonderful stuff inside of it. We've got to review it at the start of the day, the night before, and throughout the day. We should have it either open on our computer, paper planner open on the desk, and just glancing at it throughout the day. It's like hitting the refresh button. What's coming next? What's coming next? How much longer? What am I doing when I leave the office or whatever? If you're in a field, a profession that involves frequent changes to your plans, like being a contractor or maybe a real estate agent, you might have to have times throughout the day where you reevaluate the plan and make adjustments as you go. And also, as they come up, and again, this is something we all know, but it's the implementation, record any new future commitments in your daily plan as they arise. So as you're scheduling your next therapy appointment or your next dental visit, and a lot of places, they'll have loads of reminders these days. You'll get text reminders. You'll get the appointment card that is actually a sticker that you can peel apart and actually put in your planner, but get it down before you lose it. And this is one where sometimes people will justify not doing it because they'll have the thought, like if they're scheduling the next meeting with me, they'll say, well, Dr. Ramsay's really busy, so I'll write it down when I get to my car or something like that. And I remind them, you know what, just take a moment now. Or if you're with your dentist or something else, just say, just give me a minute, I want to get this down. Most likely the person, even if they're busy, they know it's not going to take very long to write it down in your planner, and remembering that the person will probably appreciate that you take the next meeting seriously enough that you'll write it down. The nice thing about having the planner, though, it also serves as a record of what you accomplished, and it's also a source of data where you can look back and say, boy, I really, Wednesday was too overwhelming for me. What are some things I have to cut back on? Or maybe I didn't leave myself enough time to get from point A to point B, so the next time I have to realize this meeting says it ends at 2 o'clock, but it really ends at 2:15. So the planner is like one of these skills that we just, it's a living entity in a way, because the next day is always a new day, so we have to repeat using this. And it doesn't protect us from life happening. Sometimes there will be emergencies, or there's a traffic jam or a flat tire, but at least having the template of the plan gives us something from which to make modifications when life happens. So I think I covered this well enough already. It takes time to plan, so you want to sit down, use your planner to set out the day, review any obligations that are already in there, like, oh yeah, I did schedule a haircut for later today. I have to remember that. Add in, when you're making your plan, add in any known commitments or obligations already for that day. Meetings at work, classes, like times you have to pick up from school. Reserve times for self-care, sleep, meal, exercises. So next slide. When we think about like our day is like $24, if you will. Some of these things like sleep, the obligations, this is like taxes already taken out. We've already spent that money. We already have commitments, and then looking at what we have left. Leave buffer times, the appointments for the tasks from your daily to-do list. Make sure that things are, defined in reasonable terms, reasonable time frames, and again, can't repeat this enough, it is good to have blocks of time that are downtime, discretionary time. It could be a workout at the gym. It could just be, I just don't want to have to do anything right now. I might putter around on the computer or whatever. And with the use of the planner, it also helps with the choreography of tasks, finding out what order makes sense. When is the best time to work out during the day? Or you might find it would be great to be able to wake up early before work and exercise, but if that's not realistic, when are times during the day, the evening, or the weekend that makes sense? So overall, you have to get practice with the plan and develop trust in it. Focus on engaging in that first task on your to-do list, the first task in your day, and trust that as you look at the plan, you'll be able to engage in the things that come later and, again, referring to it throughout the day. I talked about making the task behavioral. I think I've emphasized that enough because a lot of times we'll procrastinate on things because the task as defined initially is too overwhelming. So making it sort of like a recipe almost, breaking it down to that level can help us get started.
Very good. There are plenty of questions. One I thought that would be good to start out with, are there any to-do list templates or planners that those with ADD have found to be effective?
I'm sure there are probably about 1 billion of them out there these days because I think among the apps and templates, but really when you think about it, we're just talking about rows and columns of boxes. So this could be like a monthly calendar that just has one square for each day. This could be like a month at a glance calendar or a week at a glance calendar. Like mine has every day of the week and 15-minute time increments or whatever. So we're just talking about, you have to find the one that works well for you. So you will be able to find it out there. You can probably just do an internet search or you can make it yourself with any sort of word processing document. But the thing is it's a visual representation of our time. So the boxes externalize time and then putting the tasks in the boxes, and then from that you get a flow to your day. Now we've got to learn that the hard work is how many or how few tasks do I put in these boxes, and how much time do I devote to each of these tasks? And there's no one size fits all, but I think the very process of going through that and externalizing time, sometimes just by looking at it we can see, oh my gosh, I'm scheduled from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. There's no way I'm going to exercise at 11 p.m. And that way we can start moving things around and personalizing the schedule and making it one that will increase the likelihood of following through on. And sometimes it's not like the jam-packed schedule that works best. It's the one that has enough flow to it where we get to enough, but that it's not overwhelming. So it's not we're going to complete everything in one day. It's sort of how in the course of a week or a month we can get to everything we need to get to.
One mom asks, I am a mom running a household with small children and lots of distractions daily. I would love some practical goal-setting strategies to put into practice in the wake of being so busy. It's tough to plan when you have urgent things that can't be put off or that suddenly come up and have to be dealt with now.
Absolutely. Stay-at-home parent is one of those who's, or working parent or parent in general, is one of those professions, if you will, that, we could reasonably predict, or at various ages and multiple children, the schedule and the plan will be a fluid thing. Now, all that being said, it can be useful to have some plans for some things that you'd want to get done in the course of a day or an evening or whatnot. So it could be while you're with your children and with your children, but also maybe those times when they're asleep or there's downtime, having some goals that you want to accomplish. Now, if somebody doesn't go down for a nap or needs to be taken to the pediatrician for an emergency appointment, or we get a snowstorm and something is closed that we expected to be open, or somebody who's going to watch our children can't make it over, life happens all over the place. But it's still useful having that template. And then at least once we have that template, is that if there is something, one, that might be a documentation. Okay, I have to cancel this next meeting because we have to go to the pediatrician. But if we have it in our plan, it's not like we forget about that thing that we have to cancel until we get the voicemail message from the person saying, where were you? It increases the likelihood of we can be proactive and manage our schedule to increase the likelihood that we can reschedule that other thing. And there's one more point I wanted to make. Again, I like the old saying, you have to know the rules so you can break them. Well, we've got to have a plan, even if it's a thumbnail sketch of one. And as a parent, you might say, I'm going to set the bar low. I might expect to get this one thing, this one administrative task done around the house, maybe during nap time or, after school, before dinner, whenever. And even if it doesn't come to pass, having it there when things do break our way or the schedule does stay on track, it increases the likelihood that we will be able to do it and get enough done and at least know what we're not doing so that we can reschedule it. I know nothing's ever going to be perfect for parenting, but at least for some of the things that we can predict, we can take better control of those things.
Yeah, Ken has a question. It's a good one. Several people have asked it. What if your time sense of how long a task will take is poor, and you find out that the task takes much longer than expected? As you know, ADHD and time management are a challenge, and that is sort of integral to this whole to-do list and planning. So So how do you solve that one?
A couple thoughts. That's why we talk about, starting with maybe setting a time increment 30 minutes that may be too short to do a particular task, but it allows you to find out without over-investing time or having it bleed into other tasks. So you can view it as an experiment. And this is where, something we didn't, talk about in this slide set, but I did say how the daily plan and all these things, it's a large experiment. This is where we start finding out and looking back at the old schedules to see what works and what doesn't. So that way, based on tracking how much time something actually takes, that becomes a task. That way we can make more personally informed decisions. We start to know ourselves better. And with that, there is the need for some sort of visible timepiece. Having the cell phone out, using the stopwatch feature, the clock feature, just tracking on the clock how long something takes, because that's where, yes, the internal sense of time for most folks with ADHD doesn't always map on to the real clock time. So that's something that we do want to calibrate these plans and the to-do list plans, the behavioral plans, the calendar plans with realistic expectations for how long something takes. So there's no shortcut around it. It is doing it in real time, but then gathering the data about how long stuff takes so we can make more informed decisions. And that goes back to leaving adequate buffer time, between getting from point A to point B. That also happens with people's morning routines, that they don't factor in how long they spend checking email before they leave the house or on the cell phone. And some of this is also behavioral things such as, we get out of the shower, we get dressed, we're ready to go to the train, but then we don't factor in how long we spend playing Candy Crush, and then we miss the train or something like that. So there's going to be how much time do things take, but also there's what behaviors do I engage in, and when do I engage in them? Can I wait until I'm on the train to play the cell phone game?
Mary asks, she frequently doesn't follow through on her intentions, and she says, how can I not feel badly about myself? It's a fair amount of that, and get back to the task at hand. Do you have any quick sort of mental strategies to get over that?
this gets at the role, and these are strategies just like with the planning ones, we have to repeat. But this gets right to the heart of the cognitive interventions in cognitive behavioral therapy, where even setting out to do some of the things that we're talking about today, that we talked about in the procrastination webinar, that we talk about in the book, nothing's 100%. And the metaphor I used, medications get FDA approved when they can there's a lot that goes through with it, but if they can document 30% improvement in symptoms, and sometimes what will happen with behaviors, we'll do well on Monday, we'll do well on Tuesday, Wednesday's a nightmare, then we say this doesn't work and we stop. Well, right there, we probably had 67% improvement, and I say if we come up with a medication that improved things 67%, we're billionaires, but we're most focused on the most immediate setback, and with ADHD, there's going to be a high likelihood that somebody goes, you know what, I've tried this many times before and it hasn't worked. So at the first frustration, there's going to be an understandable response. Here we go again. I tried this before. It doesn't work, so I'm going to stop it now. And, I guess I failed at this. And this is where we want to be able to see the distortions of, well, what has happened before? Of course. If you will, the quote-unquote failure rate for these things is 100%. If we define that as sometimes we're going to forget to write something down, or we're going to think something doesn't take as long as it does, but we want to identify that and say, well, is this really a failure, or is this part of the trial and error that's going to go into, any sort of plan? Even if our plans are fairly consistent, things like weather, not feeling well, other things will create variability in how we do our plans. So this is, rather than it being a sign that it's not working, it's one of these things that we have to factor in and we adjust to it. So going back to when things don't work, part of the quote-unquote experiment of this is taking a look back, okay, what specifically didn't work? Let's make the quote-unquote failures, let's make them behavioral rather than characterological. What happened that I wasn't expecting? And that happens sometimes. Are there things that I overestimated, underestimated? I thought it would only take me 30 minutes to drive across town for my doctor's appointment, and it actually ended up taking me an hour, and I missed the appointment. Okay, we might have to factor in, traffic. We might have underestimated that. There are ways, even with, this will sound like a cliche, but with things, when there are setbacks, and that's why we keep the planner, we can look back and see and factor that in the next time.
Okay. Several people use apps and software. One uses Evernote and says she's been very successful.
Yeah, I've heard positive things about that, yeah.
Yes. And they're just asking for any recommendations you might have on the technological front.
You know what? I'm sitting at my desk right now, and I'm reaching for the copy of our book where we did some, I think we came up with a list of some helpful things. There is something called, there's an app called DUE, D-U-E, that gives reminder alerts for tasks. There's a 30/30, define time to devote to a task and then get a prompt to move on to the next task. Epic Win, you get rewards for task completions. I have Evernote down here. There are several countdown apps that are sort of like a clock running down, like from 10 minutes down to 0 to help you, set out how much time you're going to devote to a task. Time Since is a to-do list reminder. Home Routines helps you organize daily chores. Bento, B-E-N-T-O, organized projects, plans, and important information. So, there's a lot of things out there. And just for the financial disclosure, we didn't design any of these apps, nor did we get any compensation for them. But just in our search at the time of writing the book, those are a few that we came up with that seemed like they would be helpful for folks with ADHD. But I'm sure there's been many since, the book wasn't published that long ago, but I'm sure there are many coming out because this is something, how we spend ourselves. It's what the executive functions help us with. How efficiently do we do what we set out to do, organizing our behavior across time. And this externalization of time. Time is actually a very fascinating thing because not too long ago, the whole notion of the whole world having the same time system, that's a relatively novel feature that seemed to start coming about once, at least in the U.S., once there was the cross-country railroad system. So all of a sudden, the time in Boston had to be the same in Philadelphia so that people could be on time, because before that, different towns would have their own time system. Like there might be a clock in the church. So you might have towns like right next door to each other, but their time frame was like 15 minutes off or something like that. So it was only like in the industrialized age where you had to be on time for work and people were wearing wristwatches and whatnot that we really had this hyper coordination of time. So it has been a stretch for the executive functions, and we all benefit from these tools, but they're more essential for folks with ADHD. So how about that? You got ADHD, executive functions, and a little bit of the history of coordinated time, all in this one webinar.
Thanks very much.
You bet.
Several people are wondering if lack of sleep undermines their ability to follow through on intentions. I mean, which leads me to the question of self-care, and stress reduction, etc.
Which is one. Oh yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sure all of these factor into whether you're being successful in your planner and to-do list.
Absolutely, and that's why we emphasize so much. And when we talk about like sleep and use of technology and things like that, one of the first things in the planner is when do you go to bed, or when do you have to go to bed to get as much sleep as you need, and what time do you have to wake up to get ready for work. It's actually probably, like we could argue, the central feature, the thing that should be planned first, and why we emphasize so much. Part of, like, when you're sitting down to do your plan, make sure you reserve time for meals, exercise, family time. All these, they're good in their own right. But they also support all the other things that we have to do, want to do, whatnot. So sleep difficulties, they're very prominent for folks with ADHD, and yes, all those things, stress, depression, anxiety, all these things it doesn't necessarily, it won't say it stops the ability, but like with all things, these are factors that, I used the metaphor when we talked about procrastination, about we're probably never fully motivated to do a lot of the obligations we have in our day-to-day life. If we wait to be really motivated to go to work 100%, we're going to be missing a lot of work, even if we like our job. But we just need swing votes, like in Congress. We just need to get the 51-49 to say, all right, let me get to the train. Let me get there. And with poor sleep, stress, distraction, whatever else, these are all things that cost us a few votes that can lead us not to do something, or to say, oh, I don't feel like working out now, I'll go to the gym tonight after dinner. And if we do that, that's fine. And also, every now and again, we're going to give into it, or maybe it's snow and we don't feel like driving in the snow. We will miss some workouts. That's another thing. Let's normalize that nothing's going to be perfect. And it doesn't mean that it's failing. Life happens. But it gives us templates for, okay, I skipped that workout, or it was snow, or the gym was closed, so I want to be doubly sure the next day I plan to work out that I get there. It helps us. We will get off track sometimes, but these templates help us get back on track quicker. But going back to the original thing, yes, all these things like a bad night's sleep or consistently poor sleep can get in the way of, can undermine doing these, following through with the intentions. And hopefully what happens is, as we're getting more productive in our day and we're facing a lot of the things that we have been avoiding, and we get them out of the way, rather than mounting stress from not doing things, we're getting enough positive rewards from, hey, it felt good getting that done, I'm taking care of myself, and now all of a sudden, rather than, like, one thing I hear is, well, I like staying up late because that's when everything's quiet, no businesses are open, and I can just do my thing. Well, hopefully we're doing our thing throughout the day so that when it comes time for sleep, we're tired and we say, you know what, now I can fall asleep because I'm confident I'm keeping up with things better than I was before.
Mm-hmm. In reference sort of to that, somebody actually recommended that you put in your to-do list, congratulate yourself for having gotten the things above this done.
Yes. And just even the reinforcement that comes, and people say, just from crossing off things on the list, Or, there was, I hope you don't mind me using a brand name, but like didn't Staples, the stationery store, even though we don't use stationery as much anymore, but they would have like that Staples finish button. And I think we had one patient in our program who got himself one because when he would finish a task, he would hit that button, and that was just his little thing. But I think one of the things that we talk about but we don't always implement is the whole notion of rewarding ourselves for getting things done. Now, we can't sort of go out and spend $100 on ourselves every time we load and unload the dishwasher or something like that. But this is where scheduling the downtime, being able to watch a baseball game, something on TV that we enjoy, doing something we like, sort of how we choreograph the schedule. And this goes back to, and it's called the Premack principle. David Premack at the University of Pennsylvania, and pretty much what the Premack principle says, and what we all know, do your homework, then watch TV. Eat your vegetables, then have ice cream. The order in which we do things helps increase the reinforcement of doing the have-to tasks, if you will, and then follow that with the positive reward. And hopefully along the way, these things, we can also feel good about getting our workout done. We can feel good about getting the homework done, or getting taxes out of the way. We're never going to enjoy it. It's never going to be recreational doing taxes, but that whole notion, if we're more confident, if I put in the time, I'm going to get this done, that's a reinforcer that we underestimate beforehand.
Mm-hmm. There are a slew of questions pretty much that add up to this question. I have used planners in the past, and just as with everything else, the initial motivation wears off and I don't stay consistent with it. How can I truly make the to-do lists and the planners a habit, a long-term habit?
Right. It is like with the topic of procrastination and follow through on anything that we go, I know I want the results, but following through on this is difficult. One, partly it is working to have the process of doing this habitual. And so it might be externalizing for the time being until it becomes more so, having the note on the bathroom mirror or whatever, okay, after shower, sit down and work on planner or whatever. And then the very act of having it with you, having it be a companion, so you can get used to the behavior of using it. And this is where it can be useful, I know, in working with people in the cognitive behavioral therapy. We'll run through and say, all right, we all know this is a good idea, but we'll talk about when you leave the office, what's going to get in the way of you using it this week. So we anticipate, I'll probably forget bringing it with me to school or the office, or I'm going to tell myself, as soon as I don't write something in, I'm going to be less likely to write something else in, and we'll just problem solve around, and I'll just run through some of the basics. What thoughts do you have about doing this? Because sometimes people will go into it saying this won't work, or it hasn't worked before, so what's different now? And we'll come up with an answer. Well, before, I would just pick up a planner, or somebody would hand me one, and I would just use it. But now we're coming up with some more tactics for how to use it, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. What are some of the emotions that go into it? Well, I feel silly pulling it out in front of my boss, writing down the next meeting, or carrying it with me. But we can talk about, so that's a combination of, thoughts and also feelings, but we can talk about, hey, do you think your boss has a planning system, or does your boss have some administrative assistant who serves that function? We all use it to some degree. Any emotions about doing it? What are the behaviors, the behaviors that you might engage in to procrastinate or to avoid using it? Well, I'm not going to put it with all my important stuff. I don't carry it with me. I don't make a point of bringing it with me, like when I go to the dentist appointment or whatever. And these are all things that we can problem solve around. It doesn't mean nothing's ever perfect. It doesn't mean you'll never go a weekend or a few days or a week not using it. But again, that reference point of getting back to it, identifying, well, how did I not do it? What got in the way, or what are my feelings about it, and what will it take to get back on track? I know nothing's perfect. We don't have the magic wand here. We're not talking about 100%, but like I said, going back to changing things 30% more. And the more we do it, the more habitual it comes. And this also speaks to the personalization. Like sometimes people might start with the electronic planner, but find out that they don't reference it enough, that they sort of come around that I have to use a paper planner. Somebody else goes, hey, the paper planner is too clunky. I have to use a smaller one that I can fit in my pocket, or I have to get better at using the phone, but then sync it with my computer. There's no one size fits all, but there's a lot of things that we can look at how somebody doesn't use it or doesn't do it that can help increase their likelihood of using it.
One person says she wakes up every day with the intention of completing a lot of things on her to-do list. She's thought it out, and she tells everyone in her household that she doesn't want to be bothered, and yet distractions always seem to be coming her way, and she even puts earbuds in to keep the noise levels down. But she has problems with unintended distractions, and it really takes her off task. Any suggestions for that?
Right. Well, it's going to be hard in this setting to sort of personalize it to every situation, but even, maybe even the thing with doing a whole lot of things, which makes sense, and this is like one of the thoughts that goes into it. You know what, I've got to catch up for all the things I didn't do yesterday or the day before, and then we have this mounting list of things. It might be, and even using the to-do list, it's like one thing, and you hold it in your hand until you complete it. Now, is this going to protect somebody from somebody pulling on your arm or something else going on? But it's something to make the task tangible, to increase the likelihood that it will get done. And it has to be defined in something that you can do right then. And so that just the tactile thing of holding an index card in an envelope that just has the one task, whatever it might be, in front of one's eyes and in their hand, that's something that can, again, increase the likelihood. And I think sometimes focusing on one at a time, as cliche as that sounds, ultimately that's how we do the tasks anyway. Regardless of how many we have on the list, we can only really get one done at a time. However much mythology there is out there about multitasking, we're really talking about serial monotasking in terms of getting things done. So, I hope that can help out a little bit in terms of like at least one strategy for, trying to get things done in the midst of being highly, highly distractible.
Believe it or not, there are about 5 or 6 questions that ask the same thing. These folks, the harder they try to create their to-do list and plan, the tougher it is for them. I'm not sure there are any. I'm wondering if you have any solutions to that. They've come to the point where they actually resent doing this.
Well, one of the questions, there is the reality that as we get better at doing it, then we start to see all that there is to do. Because sometimes what we're talking about with ADHD is, quote unquote, paying down the debt from past procrastination or whatever. So some of that can be a reality and things that some folks are facing of, I didn't know how much I had to do until I started doing it a little bit. But in some ways the answer is still the same. There can be multiple answers. One answer is you can still only do one thing at a time. So how do we prioritize what needs to be done? And even if it's something big, like an IRS audit, how do we break it down to the next step that you can act on today? Is it responding to an email? Is it looking for papers? Whatever. Before we take care of something around the house. There's also like another strand of answers is, well, are there some things that we can start outsourcing or getting help with? Either asking for help from others or, like, since I've been using taxes, hiring an accountant to help out and help us get out from under the things. Now that becomes another task, finding an accountant. So yes, in some ways these things can get more complex, but hopefully what happens is as we take steps, we can focus on what we're doing well, and we can only do so much at a time. And as we start responding to things or taking care of things, we get some positive results, or people are willing to meet us halfway or negotiate with us or whatever. maybe there will be more solutions, available to us. And going back, though, just to the frustration of doing it, again, it goes back to, lowering the bar. So if that goes down to, well, what's one task I can get out of the way so at least I don't have to do it? So the one at a time approach. One thing, gentleman I was working with, he came up with, he would, when it came to some tasks around the house, he would write each one on an index card or some piece of paper and put it in a little bowl or something in the middle of the table. And when it came time to work on something, he would just reach in and pull out the task. So there were things that they were all defined in manageable ways. So it wasn't like he would reach in one day and it would say paint the house or something like that. But these are all things that could be done like in 15 minutes or less. And that was a way that he said if he sat down and listed out 2 or 3 of these things, he would probably talk himself out of doing it. But like when he would define a block of time in which he could do these things, he would reach in and grab something out and just that would help him break it down into a manageable step.
Mm-hmm. Does medication help with this whole process of to-dos and planning?
It can help with the core symptoms, and some people say once my symptoms are better under control, now I'm better able to sit down and do this or follow through with it. But sometimes people say, I'm feeling better symptom-wise, but I still have a hard time sitting down and getting myself to do it because just because we're on the right medication doesn't mean we're magically looking forward to organizing our income taxes or whatnot. And one other thing I'll speak to is because very often ADHD doesn't travel alone, meaning there might also be coexisting depression or anxiety, which can also factor into the mix and make it harder to do stuff. But a lot of what we're talking about here in terms of behavioral activation, getting engaged in things we haven't been doing, including self-care, or exposing ourselves to things that we've been avoiding because they're stressful, they can also be effective for helping improve mood and reducing anxiety. So getting started on things and getting active, behavioral activation has been known to help with improving mood. And, facing something we've avoided, hey, with anxiety, the only way out is through. Hopefully finding out it's, breaking it down, making it a fair fight so it's hopefully not as bad as we thought it was going to be. And facing it, we can help reduce anxiety as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we'll have to end the webinar there. Thanks again for all of your insights, strategies, and takeaways. I know it's instructive for me, and I think probably the rest of the webinar participants. So thanks again, Dr. Ramsay.
You're very welcome. Always happy to do it.
Have a good day, everyone.
For more Attitude Podcast and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.